first things I'd like to say is thank you for coming out tonight to support the event. This is the first of two parts. The topic, the general overarching topic, is the idea of moral and ethical development in children. Tonight's first it's a first look at this two-part issue, which is two related issues really, and we have this idea of how to raise ethical children, how to raise children that care about others and their communities. And then on the 2nd of May, we also have a session that looks at bullying prevention. Yeah, bullying prevention, and bullying prevention starts in early childhood. So the idea is that these two sessions will complement each other. So what we'll do is today is we'll have a discussion, and then we're going to leave some time at the end for questions. So hopefully that will be the way we'll proceed tonight. And I think when I was first told about this topic, moral and ethical development, I thought this is a really, really important topic. I think one of the things that came instantly to my mind is that some of the biggest challenges that we face as societies, some of the really big pressing challenges that we face, center around our ability to care for one another. Also about our ability to have consideration for future generations, which extends and leads to this idea of having a care for our environment. So caring, compassion, kindness, consideration for other people are all essential ingredients of a happy, healthy society. And many of our societies today are not as happy or as healthy as we would like them to be. So for example, a recent piece of research from the UK suggests that between 2005 and 2013, the rate of children who were prescribed antidepressants increased by 54%. I'll say that again, this is children, the rate of children that were prescribed antidepressant medication, Prozac, etc., increased by 54%. Similarly, in the US, there's data research from the US that suggests there's been a decade-on-decade increase in narcissistic traits, neurogenia, personality traits. So each decade, the scores for narcissism seem to get higher and higher. Narcissism, as you know, is about self-focused selfishness and low levels of empathy or lack of concern for other people. Yeah. At the same time as the rates for depression have gone higher and the rates for narcissism have gone higher, also our fixation and our obsession with personal and individual achievement seem to have increased. I work in academia, and one of the things we often joke about is we will say things like, the A grade is the new C, and the C grade is the new F. Yeah? Globally, you find this phenomenon that the average grade used to be a C. Now about 50% of students get grades. There is definitely a greater focus on achievement than there ever was before. Some people will go so far as to argue that we've sacrificed kindness, compassion, and consideration for others for the sake of personal achievement, which brings to my mind an old Arabic saying, al-hilm qabla al-ilm, which can be roughly translated as kindness and compassion before higher learning. Yeah? And it's in this context that I'm very, very happy and proud to introduce my discussant, I won't call her a speaker, my discussant for the evening, Dr. Luba Feigenberg. So please, she's a developmental psychologist who has an interest, I won't say an interest, she has a passion for the social, emotional, and ethical development of children. And that passion has led her to be heavily involved with a project which will be the focus of tonight's presentation, heavily involved with a project called Making Caring Common. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to our guest, Dr. Luba.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Luba, the first question on my lips, and I'm sure many of the audience too, is making caring common. What's that all about? And I think when I heard the title, the first thing I thought was, okay, so if you want to make caring common, there's an idea that maybe caring isn't as common as it once was, or perhaps our societies are less caring than they were. So tell us a bit about the project and where the ideas came from and why you think it's important.
Absolutely. Well, it's just a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Making Caring Common is a project that's housed at Harvard University at the Graduate School of Education. And as you said, it was really initiated out of a concern that children were growing up in a culture and in a world that prioritized individual success over caring for each other, and that would have a really negative impact on the communities that we live in, that the schools our children go to, and to the world at large. So the project was started with that as its foundation, and we do research with children and parents and teachers about what caring means to them, how important it is to them, and try to develop tips and strategies for parents and educators to bring into the home and to bring into the schools to promote a greater sense of empathy, a greater sense of caring for other people, and a concern for our communities.
Okay, so this, if I get this right, this is a group of, I guess, academic psychologists, researchers at Harvard Graduate School of Education.
That's right.
And they decided to pull this thing together.
That's right. And one of the big focuses of the work is doing the research, but finding ways to bring that to the public in as many ways as possible so that we can integrate into conversations that are already happening about parenting and about schooling, and to develop resources that are really useful in people's everyday lives.
Okay, I think that's really important, this, because very often what academics do is they'll do a lot of research, it will stay in dusty journals, and it never makes it out into the public domain.
Exactly.
So I guess that's the other sense of the word common. Making caring common is this idea of the outreach element of it.
The outreach element is definitely a piece of the word common, and another piece of the word common is to make it more prevalent in our relationships with each other, in our homes, and in our communities.
Excellent. And I think this idea of caring, what comes to my mind when I hear the word caring is just the concept of empathy. So maybe perhaps say a little bit more about what you mean by caring and what is empathy. I guess one of the things that always comes to my mind when I think about empathy is the idea that some people are really empathic. Yeah. If I fell off this chair now, yeah, some people would feel my pain. Yeah, other people would stare blankly. So we seem to differ, don't we, in our levels of empathy. So perhaps talk a little bit about this, the idea of empathy, how it develops, and especially in young children.
So all people really are born with the seeds of empathy and the ability to care for other people and to show that care. Research has shown that infants as young as 6 months old, when given a choice between two puppets, will choose a puppet that has helped somebody else over a puppet that has not helped somebody else in a scenario. So we have this inside of us very early on, and it develops over time. The capacity grows and expands with the help of the adults around us. So it's parents first, and other adults in children's lives, and their teachers as well, that help support the development of empathic thinking and feeling, and help children really expand their view of what that is. It's also important to think about empathy as being the ability to take somebody else's perspective, to sort of put yourself in somebody else's shoes, is how it often gets talked about. Yeah. Think about how they might feel. And that's one piece of it. And then there's another piece about empathy that is about acting on that feeling. And those two don't always go together. So to your example of falling off the chair, there might be people in the audience who feel some kind of pain for you and are concerned, but might not act on that. And that doesn't mean that they're less empathic. It means that they may have made certain choices based on the situations around them or other factors in their own upbringing, but that there is this difference between the thinking, feeling, and acting part of it. And we see that in children all of the time, especially when we start to talk to them about, what would you do in this situation? And oftentimes children can tell us what the thing is that they think they're supposed to do, but they might not act on that.
Okay.
And again, that's where it's important for adults to help support them in thinking through, well, why might you not act on that? And what would it take for you to act on that and to demonstrate how important it is?
So what are some of the reasons that would prevent somebody from acting on the empathy? What are some of the common sort of reasons why people don't act on their empathic feelings?
Well, there's a lot of studies that show that children don't always act on the feeling that they have because of their perception of the environment around them. And it might feel too risky. So the classic example is in bullying situations where if a child sees somebody else being bullied and they are asked, what should you do in that situation? They can almost always say, I know that I should say something, or I know that I should go find an adult. But in the moment, the most common thing for children to do is nothing. And they watch it happen. And oftentimes they don't feel that their own safety in that situation would be protected.
Okay. One of the things that fascinates me is that, I mean, as a psychologist, the people who don't develop empathy or appear not to develop empathy or have really low levels of empathy, if you want to quantify it. So what are some of the negative consequences of being unempathic in the, on the extreme fringes?
So there are two major consequences, I would say. The first is at an individual level. Children who grow up having lower levels of empathy or less of a capacity to be empathic for others have a much harder time developing relationships with other people. And that contributes to lower levels of happiness and lower levels of success and a greater likelihood that children will engage in negative behaviors later on, like disruptive behavior in school or your classic acting out behaviors, higher uses of drug and alcoholism, and other risk-taking kinds of behaviors. So at the individual level, having lower capacity for empathy is detrimental to children. And then at the community level, if we have more people who are demonstrating lower levels of empathy, it creates a less healthy society where people are not taking each other into consideration and might be more likely to act in ways that are harmful, whether that's bullying or harassment or violence.
Okay, so low levels of empathy, bad for the individual, bad for society, and I guess it really key to that is that it makes it hard for people to have relationships is a key part of that. So obviously empathy is super, super important. Yeah, it's really important. I think that leads me to this piece of the research that you did, which looked at how important these things are, but differences between how important is empathy, caring to the average parent versus the average child, etc.
Yes. So in our studies, we ask children, and we have responses from over 14,000 children. We ask them to rank caring, achievement, and happiness in order. And what we find is that 1 in 5 children, so 20%, say that caring for other people and helping other people is the most important thing.
Okay, so just 1 in 5.
1 out of
says
5.
Caring is
Number one.
Black and white.
Overwhelmingly, children tell us that achievement, whether that's academic or sort of accomplishment and task-oriented, is the most important thing. And when you put that together with happiness, which we're defining here as really individual-focused feelings of happiness.
There's like an individual hedonistic pleasure pursuit definition of happiness.
Right, like I am okay, and that is the most important thing, which I think is an important distinction, especially given the work around happiness that's happening in this country. But so most kids, 80% of kids, will put either their individual happiness or their individual achievement, so individual success, as the most important thing.
Okay, and so just 1 in 5. And these children seem, I mean, did you do any research to look at what are the factors that set the caring children apart? What are the factors that make these kids choose that?
Just in a very preliminary sense, one of the things we find is that the children who are in schools, some of the survey questions ask them to rate their schools as well, and children who report that their schools are more caring, respectful places tend to say that caring is more important.
Okay, so part of the whole school socialization process.
It's very important, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
So what's interesting, though, is if you ask parents, because we also ask parents in our survey what's most important to them, overwhelmingly, parents say that the most important thing to them is that their children are caring and kind to other people.
Okay.
But when you ask children what they think their parents think, they say that their parents think that achievement is the most important thing. Okay. So parents say it's most important to be helpful and caring. Kids say that their parents value achievement overall. So there's a disconnect between what parents feel and what they think they're saying and what the children are hearing.
That's really interesting. I just want to, if I just turn to, I'm not going to expect you to answer me, but for those of you who are parents, if your child came home and told you, I have received an A grade, I'm top of the class, how, in your own mind, how happy would you be on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, and if your child came home and said, I helped some child today who fell over, I picked him up and I, patched him up and sent him on his way, how much happiness and positive emotion would you show the child in that situation? I'm kind of asking this question rhetorically of myself also. I think this perhaps helps explain the discrepancy. We do really objectively praise achievement.
We do. And, this is not to say that achievement isn't important, because it absolutely is. But the interesting piece from our research that we got so intrigued by was that there was this gap between what parents felt was most important to them and what their children were interpreting. And it's really those daily messages that are being sent to children about achievement are deafening and are overwhelming the messages that we may be sending about the importance of caring for other people.
I know this is a difficult question, but so you have these three things: happiness, individual happiness, achievement, and caring. From your own professional experience and from the research data that you've gathered, what would be the ideal balance for those, for those three components? What would perfection look like?
Right. Well, the thing that was most concerning to us was just how skewed it is. The messages that kids are hearing are toward achievement. And one of the negative consequences of that is that, as you said in your beginning remarks, children are experiencing incredibly high levels of stress and anxiety and depression. And a lot of that is achievement-oriented and caused by this sort of obsession we all have with individual achievement and success. And it's not allowing children to hear those messages about caring for other people and to invest in developing the relationships that help them feel healthy and strong and ultimately happier.
Okay. All right, so let's just say, for argument's sake, we'll keep the happiness bar quite high. We'll keep the achievement bar quite high. How do we bring that caring bar up? So what do we as parents, what are the things we do? What does making caring common advocate? What are the tangible, practical tips? What are the things we can do to lift that caring bar up a little bit?
Yes. So parents are the most important people in their children's lives from a very early age. And as the research shows, the children are watching what parents are doing all of the time. And so it's really important for parents to be role models of what caring, empathetic, compassion looks like in all of the things that we say, and I think even a little bit more importantly, sometimes the things that we do.
I totally agree. It's more what we do than what we say. Yeah.
Those are the things that kids really pick up on, and it's also the things that we don't say that kids pick up on, and they will see and hear the discrepancies between those two things, right? So we say, it's really important that you don't lie and that you tell the truth, and then our children overhear us making a little white lie to somebody about why we can't go to some event. And they may not ask us about it, but they've interpreted that message that sometimes we do lie. And that's different from what we've said when we tell them not to lie.
Okay. I think this again, brings to my mind an Arabic saying, which is, if you want children like Hassan and Hussein, who are the grandchildren of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then you have to have parents like Fatima and Ali. So I think this idea of the parents as a role model is kind of universal. It's a real universal idea. But I think in today's world, what we also have is we have lots of other influences, lots of other role models. We have a celebrity culture, we have the internet, we have, cable TV. So I think children are arguably exposed to a lot of other role models, maybe not even just in the media, but in school, even within the broader extended family. You can be a positive role model, but your child is also exposed to perhaps some negative role models. What can we do to, I guess, offset the negative impact of these, less desirable role models?
Well, one important thing to keep in mind always is that even as parents trying to be role models and aspiring to be our best selves, we're not always going to be perfect. And that part of being a role model is acknowledging that we are not perfect and that we make mistakes sometimes. And that there are people in our children's lives who are not perfect role models too. And those give us ample opportunities to talk with our children about what we have done or what we have seen other people do and how that might be different from what we would hope for in our best vision.
So I guess a lot of that's going to center around, I know the next point would be something about issues of communication. So with the role models and then making time to talk. So this is the next tip, I guess.
Yes. So talking with our children and building relationships that are based on a foundation of mutual caring and love and respect is really important. Research overwhelmingly shows time and again that the most important factor contributing to children's resilience is one close relationship. And for most children, especially at early ages, that is their parent, a parent figure.
That resilience is emotional and physical resilience? Or what kind of resilience are you talking about there?
Psychological well-being.
Okay.
So the ability to bounce back when hard things happen. Children are way more resilient and able to deal with adversity if they have positive relationships in their lives with adults. And so that starts with talking and spending time together and making the time to really connect with our children. And there are ways to do that in the midst of everything that is going on and sort of seizing those moments to have real conversations and to really listen to what our children have to say.
Okay. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I know there's a site that I see quite commonly, which is a mother on her phone, small child here, a father maybe on his iPad, and this child here is relatively starved of attention. I'm saying this in a judgmental way at all. We have maybe very busy lives, and we're always online. Often we're kind of always in work. So what are some tips, I guess, for us to be able to, if you like, disconnect and connect where it perhaps matters most in terms of developing empathy?
It's a real struggle that I think we are all trying to figure out as technology continues to evolve. And on the one hand, it's a beautiful thing because technology gives us more flexibility and ability to work in different places and spend more physical time with our families. And on the other hand, it is all-consuming and always present. So there are things we can do to prioritize the face-to-face time we have with our children, and for all of us, parents and children included, put the technology down sometimes. But there are also ways and moments in everyday life that we are together. And I think, being in the car, driving to school or driving home from school or driving to the store are great opportunities to engage in a conversation with children. I think there are times where we are, watching media together, and those are opportunities to have conversations about what we're seeing, what that might mean, and to have follow-up conversations about how children are thinking about that as well.
Okay, so in terms of conversation topics, give us some examples of the types of conversations that you think would be particularly helpful in the context of developing these caring children.
So one thing that is really helpful in talking with children is to get a sense of what's going on in their lives, to know who their friends are and who the important people to them are, because to your point from before, they're exposed to a lot of different models as they move through the world. And as parents, we don't always know who those people are or what impression they are leaving on our children. And we can ask them. Children at very young ages are able to tell us about who is important in their lives, who they spend their time with, and the kind of things they do together. And that really sets a foundation for positive communication that becomes more and more important as our children grow up.
Okay, so the first two tips, I guess, is a positive role model, and the second one is to make time for these conversations that really help strengthen the relationship with the role model. Okay, and so the next tip is.
So there will be times when children are not able to control their feelings or their emotions. At young ages, it's completely appropriate for kids to have a hard time and sometimes look like they are falling apart because they're so overwhelmed with frustration or anger or sadness. And it's important for us as parents to know that that is normal for young children. Young children show us how they are feeling through their behaviors, and that's okay. And that we also can use those moments as opportunities to teach children to name their feelings. So when the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old is, as my children have done, lying on the floor, kicking their hands and legs because they didn't get something that they want. And as a parent, that's an incredibly frustrating moment. But to recognize that literally that child cannot control that in the moment, is so overwhelmed by that feeling, and it doesn't feel safe to the child. And to be able to say, I see that you're very upset right now. I know that you're frustrated because I didn't let you have that toy that you wanted. And to help the child have some words to explain the feeling so that they begin to internalize that, and at a later point in time might be able to use the words first instead of the behaviors. But it takes a long time, and especially in those 2 and 3 years, that's when they're feeling their big feelings the most. And as they get older and we continue to have those conversations, they'll be more able to use the words first.
So this is almost like an emotional vocabulary, emotional literacy, so that they learn early on what these have words to express these emotions that they feel.
Right. And then in the moments when children are not displaying their big, frustrated, angry feelings, those are good moments to practice how to control the feeling when they might be having it. So to have conversations with children and say, sometimes we all get frustrated because we can't have that thing that we want. Or I know that you get upset sometimes when I tell you you can't do something. And brainstorm together, what are some things that you could do in that moment that might help you? We can try to take deep breaths together. We can try to take a moment to ourselves. And to give kids an opportunity to practice when they're in their best place helps them have the skill reinforced for when they're having those harder times.
So and I can see a connection now between the first 3 points. So the idea of how you respond to an emotion. You're the role model, so you kind of, you become aware of how you respond to emotions. But a lot of this, how you help the child manage it, involves these conversations, like sort of, again, it's an opportunity to have these discussions. So the management of emotions, name the feelings, and then talk about them when they're not in the actual situation, develop an understanding of what those feelings mean for the child.
Absolutely, and I think that books and stories can be great chances to do that as well. Sometimes it's easier for children to respond when it's not them.
Someone else.
But you can tell, I know my children love to hear stories about times when I was a kid and had a hard time, or even have a hard time now, because we all have those moments. And to share them with our children too, to say, gosh, I got so frustrated today at work because this person was doing something that I didn't like, and I had to remember to take a really deep breath. And it helps children see that we all have those struggles, and it's not ever going to go away, but we can get better at managing them.
Okay, so the next tip then is the...
So one thing we haven't talked as much about, but that is key when being empathic and developing the ability to be empathic to other people is helping children also think about people who are different from them. So it is natural for us all to feel most connected to our family, our loved ones, the people closest to us. But part of being a caring, kind, and concerned person is broadening that circle and thinking about the people who aren't closest to us, who might not even be like us, and helping children recognize those people in our daily lives too.
Okay, so give us examples of some of the differences that it's helpful for us to appreciate. What would be some examples?
So there's the examples of people who are different from us and trying to imagine what that might be like. I think about new children coming into classrooms and asking, how do you think it must feel to be a new child in the class when nobody knows, who you are or where you've come from? Or somebody who looks different, and whether that's skin tone or language that they speak at home or clothes that they wear, helping children understand that they have feelings and ways of thinking as well that might be different, but that we can try to understand what they might be going through. Then there's also the piece of difference that's about recognizing people who may tend to go invisible in our daily lives. So walking into a store and remembering to thank the person who held the door open for you, or to thank the person who's at the cash register when you're paying, because that's a person too who has their own set of feeling and ways of being, and recognizing those as other people in the world.
So I can kind of see this idea of you're really selfish, yeah, and you're really lacking in empathy. The only person that exists is you, yeah, and then total selfishness. And as that broadens out, I guess there's more empathy for others. And I say to go beyond the family and then to people who are different. So is it harder for us to be empathic towards people who are very different from us? And what's I guess there's a benefit in trying to understand these differences in terms of it leads to greater empathy. Is that the idea behind this particular point?
So I think it is more natural for us to feel empathic towards people who we recognize as being more similar to us first. And it doesn't mean it's harder to be empathic for people who are different, but it might not come as quickly or as naturally. And so one of the things we talk about in our research and in the strategies we've developed is helping kids zoom in and zoom out, and to recognize sort of the shared feelings that people have, and zoom in and say, well, what is that like for you? How does that make you feel in that situation? And then to zoom back out and realize that people are different in lots of ways, but that the feelings at the core of it may be more similar than we think.
Okay, so the emphasis is on similarity. Yeah, with the zoom out, you're looking for similarities to
to point out the similarities and the differences, and to make connections for children between how what they might be feeling might be similar to what somebody else is feeling, even if that person comes from a different experience or background or is thinking about things in a different kind of way.
Okay, and this idea of appreciate the differences, the idea is to see it in a positive light, I guess, even though it's very different from the way you might experience the situation. Okay, excellent. So that gives us 4 of the tips. You have some more for us?
I do. So an important piece is helping children understand that there are expectations for them, and that as parents, it's our job to be clear about what those expectations are and to set the bar high. We want our children to live up to the hopes and dreams that we have for them in terms of being a caring and kind person. And so we need to prioritize that. And a really important piece is including a message about caring for other people in all of the conversations we have with our children. So a classic example is when our kids come home from school at the end of the day. The typical question is, how are you? How was your day? What did you learn? What did you do? And we can very easily put into that question, is there somebody who you helped today? Or tell me about how the kids in your class are getting along. What is something you did today that made you feel proud?
I mean, I know I don't do that, and I just want to again, as a thought exercise, how many of us, when we speak to our children when they come home, Do we ask them specifically about, what did you do today that was good? Who did you help today? Were you kind to somebody today? Tell me about the good deed you did today. I know I tend to focus on, what was school? What did you learn today? What did you learn? What grades did you get today, perhaps? But this idea of high ethical expectations, and I know this is a kind of a tricky question, but my high might be your low, and so put what would be high expectations, or is it to the individual?
I think part of it is to the individual, but what we also find is that there are some common themes that run across. So a big one, which comes out of that finding that there's a discrepancy between what parents are thinking is important and what kids are hearing is important, is that it is critical to include that message about caring explicitly in the conversations we have with our children. I think that's really important. And then another piece that is really important is giving children real responsibilities and expecting them to contribute in their families and in the world around them. So I think usually people think about chores, and chores are absolutely one piece of that, but there's lots of other ways that we can help our children understand that being part of a family means that you contribute to that family, whether that's picking up your toys at the end of the day so that the room is clean, or helping somebody else feel better. Or that sometimes when you're in a family, you don't always get your way because you're part of a larger group, and you have to be okay understanding that too.
So these ideas of these expectations, these are arguably become part of the family culture. This is just what we expect the children to do in terms of having a level of responsibility, and this idea of, if you like, letting somebody else have their own way. Is that, if I understand?
Well, I think it's a feeling of obligation outside of yourself.
So less selfish, yeah.
Right? And again, that looks different when a child is 2 than when a child is 8. 2-year-olds are very self-oriented,
They have
developmentally
to be.
speaking.
Yeah.
It's all about them. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about them within the context of the family and even point out the ways in which other people are accommodating what the child wants. And that the expectation we would have of how a 2-year-old contributes is different than an 8-year-old. But to use that language again, we are a family. In this family, we take care of each other. In this family, we treat each other kindly. In this family, we all help out. And we all help each other to be our best and to do our best.
And would you expand that out from the family to the community? Would there be some community obligations or responsibilities in terms of high standards?
Absolutely. And I think families that do some kind of service work or volunteering together can use that kind of language as well, that, we care about our community, and so we want to help make it a better place. And we do that by, spending time beautifying the neighborhood, or helping people who have less than us. And using that language with kids from really early on helps give them the sense that they are part of something bigger.
Okay, excellent. So I think that gives us one more tip, yeah?
Which is related to that, and it is giving kids opportunities to practice all of the things that we've been talking about, because they are lifetime goals, and we reinforce the skills and the beliefs by allowing children lots of room to practice it and internalize it and have it become more common and more a part of who they are.
So what are the actual, as a parent, what are the practical steps that you perhaps need to take, or things you need to do to enable the child to have these opportunities to practice? Can you give us some examples?
So one relatively small seeming thing is to give children opportunities to make decisions within the context of the family, and to have conversations about how that decision making is going to happen, so that one person doesn't always get their way just because they may have spoken first or because they have a louder voice. And,
There's almost like a governance structure within the family.
Well, again, to say, in our family, we make decisions together, and there are, we can talk about all of the options, and let's think about how we might choose something, and if you don't get your way this time, then maybe we can find a way to give you a chance next time. But to practice having those conversations, again, so that children feel a part of a group and feel connected to other people and take other people's needs and wants into account. Opportunities to practice also means, back to the example of doing community service together, but giving them real responsibilities in helping other people. And again, that might be helping out around the house, it might be helping in their community, it might be helping their neighbor who needs assistance with something. But children are able to take on responsibilities like that, and it helps when we reinforce it as well, and to say, that was very helpful of you. Thank you for being such a good helper, and for showing that you are concerned about other people in our world as well.
And what does the research suggest, I guess your research suggest, in terms of making all of this time for other people? How does that impact the bottom line in terms of achievement and happiness? Does it detract from those, or does it add to those? What kind of relationship would this increased activity have on those other two bars?
I think it contributes to children's ultimate sense of well-being and sort of well-balanced and well-rounded selves. And children like to know that they are helping other people, and it brings a sense of happiness to know that they have helped somebody else feel better or helped somebody else do something that they might not have been able to do. So it definitely contributes to that overall sense of happiness. And it also contributes to their relationships and their support networks in life, so that they have a stronger sense of feeling connected to other people, which will enable them to be more successful in the work that they do and the accomplishments that they tackle.
So if we're able to follow these steps, the 6 steps, and we develop these children, if you like, that are more caring, more empathic, what impact do you think that will have on society? What are the ultimate aims of the Making Caring Common project?
Well, I think, again, there's the individual and then there's the collective outcomes. At the individual level, I would hope that we would have more children growing into adults who make healthier decisions about their bodies, about the actions that they take, and who feel happier and more satisfied with their lives moving forward. And then at the school and community level, we would have schools that are more able to focus on learning, because they would be less distracted by some of the behavioral problems that arise when children are not as caring towards each other. And at the community level, we will have people who feel more connected to each other, who are able to be more successful in the work that they choose, and to be a more connected, engaged society.
Okay, so the net positives seem pretty desirable. Yeah. What for your team and for the project? What are some of the steps that you're currently engaged in terms of kind of making this happen?
So we do research every year. We have the survey that we do with a large number of students and parents and teachers. And we are always looking to see how children are responding to these questions about caring and happiness. And we then work with schools, and we do work with parents to find out what kinds of things they are doing already to help promote a greater sense of empathy and concern for others with their children, and to develop, from our project, to develop more strategies and tools that parents and educators can use in their everyday interactions with children to cultivate empathy and promote a greater concern for the greater good.
Okay, excellent. And what would you say so far in terms of the work that's been done? What would you say is for you has been the most impactful sort of it? What's the main achievement that you think, or the main impact the project has had so far?
we have been able to start a conversation at a higher level about what it means to be caring and why caring matters. And starting the conversation, at a national level, at a global level, is really where we wanted to be, so that we could engage the largest number of people in really thinking about the kinds of things we've been talking about this evening, about why is it important and how can we do this and what are the struggles that we face. So we hope to start that conversation and then be able to offer people resources and tools to further the work that they're already doing.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think you have no more points for us. I think we can open it. We're at the point where we can kind of summarize a little bit. So we have a program here, 6 steps. You help me out if I don't remember all 6 steps. But the idea is around the development of being a positive role model. So you need to be the ethical, moral character that you hope for, caring, compassionate character that you hope for your children to be. You need to talk. Yeah? There needs to be this ongoing conversation to understand the child and to create that close connectivity. And then there's the idea of being able to manage emotions and, again, to work with the child to help with the emotional self-management. And then there's the idea of, help me out.
Setting high ethical expectations.
High bar. Setting high ethical expectations, and then opportunities to practice all of that, and then obviously the appreciation for differences. So that's a summary of the program, and the aims are to develop these children that care about others and have a broader sense of caring for other people, communities, humanity. I think it's a very worthwhile project. So I'm going to invite the crowd to give you a round of applause before we open up for questions.
Thank you.
So I think okay, so I think we have time for questions. I don't know how. I think there's somebody with a microphone. So if there are any questions, you can put your hand up, and somebody with a microphone will make their way to you.
Good.
Yeah, hi. Just want to ask, why are you separating the sense of achievement and caring? Like, why can't or focus on both at the same time? Like, I want my child to be successful as well as caring. So why are you giving them the option to choose like one instead of choosing all 3 of being caring and prioritizing them? Thank you.
Yes. We absolutely believe that children should be all 3 of those things. Children should care about other people and their communities. Children should be oriented towards wanting to be successful and to achieve. And children should feel a sense of happiness. And we ask children about each of those things separately as well, and what feels important to them about each. And then we do ask them to rank which one they think is the most important. In part because we have found how unevenly distributed those are. I think we would be less concerned if children were ranking them more similarly across the board, because some families might stress one more than the other, or children might feel that one is more important than another at different points in time. But the fact that only 1 out of every 5 children says that caring is the most important thing was concerning to us. And so we've continued to ask that question to see if that stays the same over time or if we're able to see some change.
I think if I could chip in as well, I think sometimes an overemphasis on achievement paradoxically actually compromises the ability to achieve. So that idea of when somebody becomes so overly fixated on achievement and it's all about achievement, it sometimes takes away some of the joy from the activity that they once felt, and they become overly focused on the achievement, which can sometimes actually undermine the performance. So I think the idea of a balance, so it's no one saying it's all about achievement or all about caring, but just trying to bring a closer sort of harmony, if you like, between the 2 aspirations. There was another hand up over there, yeah.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking talk. It's been very interesting. I'm just, from what I hear, it's very interesting to often read about the happiest places to live in the world, Bhutan and these sort of places. And it would be just a very interesting study to know why it is the happiest place in relation to this, and to see if places like Finland and these education systems are similar to the findings that you found. Because your study was conducted in the US, or yeah. So it would be very interesting to see, because often from an educational point of view, when I look into curriculums and look into other places of the world, you know, there are certain places where things seem to be working and children seem to be happier than other places, and I wonder why. And I wondered if you've ever looked in or considered cross-cultural research.
It's an excellent point. The way that we define caring taps into a lot of what you are mentioning about happiness and sort of quality of life. And I think in some of the ratings of happiness, that what those rankings and ratings are really getting at are how satisfied people feel with their lives, which includes the relationships that they have. It includes the access to services and resources that they have, which are about caring for other people and making sure that our communities are taking care of each other. So I think they're very, very closely related.
And it's very interesting to see in some places like Finland, for example, the balance seems to be right, or there's a perception of the balance where at the same time as of achievement, we often recognize Finland being, you know, just to use Finland as an example, as a very good educational system. The world looks at Finland for models of education, and at the same time they're doing something right because it's supposedly a very happier place to live. So the balance seems to be interesting in that context.
I think if I can just add a point there as well, I think one of the issues with regards to a lot of the ideas here is, it sounds like there's a difference between individualistic cultures, individualistic values, and collectivist values. And so a lot of this research has been done in the US, which tends to have more individualistic sort of values. And the idea, there's a real strong emphasis on individual achievement. And in collectivist societies, or societies that have traditionally been collectivist, like the UAE, Arab societies, there's often a stronger emphasis on harmony and interdependence. So again, lots of this research really would be worthwhile having a look at in different cultural contexts.
Absolutely.
So the bars might be different in different places.
Yeah. I work as a social worker for a school, and here I've come across children. When we say that I represent a parent community too, because I'm a mother of 2 kids. And I've been, from small, I think I've been working from children from 4 years to the grade 12 section. And at one point of a time, ma'am, you said naming the feelings of what is going on, elders. Sometimes it has a negative repercussion on the children too. They just blurt out saying, I'm frustrated, I'm stressed out, to the other children. Or when a mother comes, I want to talk to you. It's in one of the sessions it happened. The child says, no, I don't want to talk to you, I'm frustrated. So do you think which age is appropriate for a child or as an adult to express our exact emotion towards the children, or naming the emotion, as you put across, coin the word, naming the emotion to the children, or name the emotion towards the children? Because sometimes it has a negative impact. They just tell it out without even knowing what exactly is happening in them.
Are you asking, I just want to clarify, make sure I understand your question.
I think I get so the idea is there an age that it's appropriate to start sort of teaching children about the names for emotions? The idea is a very valid point. This idea that young children saying, I'm frustrated or I'm stressed out. Is there an age that maybe too young to start giving them that emotional vocabulary, or is it never too young to start? What's your position?
I think that the language to identify the feelings can start very early. It helps children feel more in control of their feelings when they have words to put to it. There's a lot of research being done right now on executive functioning, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and social emotional competencies and skills. And one of the core skills is being able to be aware of the feeling, because sometimes the feeling can be so strong that it makes all of us, but young children in particular, feel kind of out of control. And so to be able to know, oh, when my heart starts beating fast, that means I'm angry. When I am upset, my palms start to feel a little bit wet. And I think it really does help children to have the words to put to that so that they can take a moment and stop the chain of events that happens between the impulse and the action. They have that desire to act on the feeling, and if we can help them stop that process and put a word to it and give them some strategies for how they might express the feeling that they're feeling, they will be more likely to express the feeling in appropriate ways than they are to throw something across the room or explode in anger. So using the words can happen at a very young age, and often becomes the more basic happy, sad, mad, glad. And as they get older, we give them more complicated terms.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, there's a few hands. There's a hand down at the front here. It's been up for a while, but there's too many hands now to cover. Maybe more
We'll get to
mics.
that.
I have two separate questions. The first is that we've done research in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, and we find that children from Arab families particularly, are spending anywhere between 8 to 9 hours per day on digital and TV. And that's the average for children between the ages of 3 to 8 years. Is there any of the research that you've done that's linked to how much time children are actually being engulfed in media and digital, and how kind they are or caring? That's number one. And then number two, in terms of empathy, you noted, and I just want to make sure, that really empathy is not dispositional. It's not like certain children tend to be more empathic. All children are born with that capacity, and that it tends to be very situational and environmentally learned, also being able to develop empathy. But in line with that, you had those 6 steps. Are there other steps that you would add to also empower children to confront situations where they're ridiculed or everyone else is not being empathic and they're the ones, you're the silly, you're the baby, or you're the goody two-shoes, which then becomes counterproductive? So is that incorporated in this?
Well, let me just, before you answer, let you answer the question, but that second question is excellent because it gives me a cue to say that the next talk, which is on May the 2nd, is all about that idea of bullying prevention. So that other piece, that if you can be empathic, but what if somebody pops up and ridicules you for your caring, compassionate nature? A lot of that will be dealt with, I'm sure, in the next session. But please feel free to answer it now as well.
I'll answer your second question first, if that's okay. So yes, you are absolutely right that we are all born with the ability to be empathic. It is not personality, it's not related to personality traits. And as children grow, the ability to take other people's perspectives and express concern is reinforced or not by the people in their lives and the situations around them. There are some situations that get hard, and it can be more difficult, it can be more risky, and quite frankly, in some situations, it can be unsafe to act always on the empathic reaction or feelings that children might have. And it's important for the adults in their lives to help them understand that too. Sometimes you make a difficult choice, and you may not, in that moment, stand up to the person who is being mean or cruel because there's too much at stake. But there are other things that you can do in the aftermath. So it's always okay to go talk to an adult afterwards. Sometimes you may go back and talk to the person who was hurt in that situation. And as children get older, to also help them see themselves as having some ability to advocate, to make things different moving forward. And that's part of that opportunities to practice piece that we talked about as well, really helping children see the places where they can contribute to making things better the next time, and whether that is advocating for a rule to change or writing a letter to try to make a difference, that they are active citizens in their own right. Does that answer that question? To go back to your first question about media, I think there's research across countries and cultures that show that the amount of time that children spend in front of screens is increasing dramatically, and that's not going to go away. We have the ability to have technology with us all of the time, and in some ways that is helping us do things more efficiently and more effectively. And there are also real costs to that. So there are two things that are important when thinking about children and media. One is being mindful of how much time they are spending, with the ability to now do more research on the brain. We do find that children's brain development is influenced by the amount of time they spend watching screens. And so we do want to keep it within certain limits. But not all media is bad. And so another piece is being educated as parents about the media that our children are experiencing, whether that's the apps that they're using on tablets or the shows that they're watching or the movies that they're watching. And being mindful of what they're being exposed to, making educated decisions about what we let them interact with, and helping them understand it, especially when they're young, having conversations with them about what they're seeing, how they're understanding it, and how it might be shaping the way that they're thinking about relationships and issues related to caring for other people.
Okay, I'm here. I have a
Hi.
question. So I know a boy that used to find it so funny to make girls cry in his class. And I know one of the points that you touched on was teach kids that it's not funny to be mean. How can we do that?
Thank you for asking that question. Oftentimes, children laugh, and we as adults do too, because we're nervous or because we don't know what else to do. And so there are plenty of situations where laughter is the first instinct, and as the adult in the situation, to point out to children that that is happening sometimes. And I will often say to kids, I know that people are laughing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we think it's funny. Sometimes we laugh because we don't know what else to do first. So that's one important piece, is sort of pointing that out to children. And then to remind children that that person has feelings too, and to say, would you think it was funny if somebody was laughing when you were feeling sad? It seems to me that that person is feeling sad right now. Do we want to laugh at that? And sometimes just asking the question and giving the child an opportunity to reflect on it is enough to make them sort of shift their thinking. And then having conversations about how that other person might be reacting and what are some other things we could do. There's plenty of ways to make people laugh and to get a reaction out of people, which is often what is at the heart of those situations. So helping children brainstorm so that they feel like they have some other strategies in their toolkits.
In terms of punishment and rewarding, some parents think that punishment and rewarding approach is very helpful and fruitful, especially with children in the early ages. To what extent do you agree with this approach?
Children need to know that there are consequences to their actions, absolutely. And they need to know what the expectations are, and they need to know what will happen if the expectation is not met. Parents can do a lot of conversation to make sure that children know that there are rules within a household, and every family is going to set those rules and expectations differently. But the important thing is for it to be clear so that children really understand what is expected of them, and that they have a clear sense of, if I do this, then this is the thing that will happen next. It has been shown that positive reinforcement of the behaviors that you want to see is more effective than a negative consequence for something you don't want to see. And so it is helpful for parents to praise and reinforce and comment on behaviors that children are displaying that are helpful and kind and caring and all of the things that we hope for. And then there are lines that children need to know. If they cross this line, then there is going to be a consequence for that.
The second point, in some schools, they use exclusion for punishment. Do you think exclusion works with the students?
Overall, it has not shown to be effective at getting rid of the behavior, but there are moments where certain things that children are doing make it very difficult for them to be in a group situation. And again, in the classroom, I would say it's very similar, that it's helpful for teachers to set expectations and develop rules with the children and have conversations early in the year. How do we want our classroom to be? How do we want to treat each other in this classroom? And to brainstorm that together with the children so that they really have some ownership over it. And then for the teachers, similarly to the parents, to be very clear about what happens when those expectations aren't met. And oftentimes, the idea of not being able to participate in something with the group is enough to motivate children to do the thing that they know they're expected to do.
Hi. I enjoyed all the information you just given us, and I believe it's a lot about what we need to say to our kids, how we need to demonstrate that as parents as well and teachers. Yet also, I believe through my work and my experience that I believe there's a shortcut to all of this. Like I learned and I realized that storytelling, creating a circle, let's say, or a space where the present, we bring all the students or the kids are so present in that space, and then talking about a subject, an emotion, and describing what that emotion means and what happens to our bodies when this emotion happens. What do you do when this happens to you? And to share a story when this happened to you, and allow the child to speak about it and everyone to listen not just with their ears, to listen with their eyes, with their heart open. And that's it. And actually there's nothing more we need to say after that. And this is how we open hearts and we open that kind of, we start a bridge, I would call it a bridge, building a bridge from one heart to another. And this is when actually compassion gets created, empathy gets created, and there's actually no education after that. It's just pure straight to the heart. And you can just leave the room after that and let these kids function on their own with what they receive from that circle time. So I believe bringing such education to our children in our schools is the easiest and the fastest. Rather than just giving information, 1, 2, 3, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to say, this is how we need to demonstrate. There's nothing more powerful than witnessing a child describing a sad story he or she went through. There's nothing more powerful than that. Because that emotion, when it's out, everyone will feel it.
So you raised a couple of really important points that I just want to echo. One is the power of stories. And I think we talked about it briefly earlier, but sometimes it's easier for children to imagine a feeling or connect with a feeling when it's not their own. And so hearing stories, whether it's from a book or a story that we as parents can share with our children from our own experiences, or hearing an experience from another child, is incredibly powerful. And you're right, gives this distance that allows them to then connect. Another point that you raised that is so critically important is helping children learn to listen, and really listen. not just wait for their turn to speak, but to really listen to what somebody else is saying, to be able to say it back, and to be able to share an example that it might be similar or different. Children learn incredibly powerful lessons from hearing about the experiences of other people, and making time for that in classrooms, and as parents helping children find those moments to do that as well, gives them enormous opportunity to expand both their circle of what they're exposed to and also the possibilities that they may not have thought of before.
I have a question. I think your first point said something about us being role models, and we're the primary role models. Now that's fine, and everybody knows that. But then what happens with the external factors? Because as Dr. Justin was saying, we're kind of a collectivist society here, and there's a lot of family involved, and there are a lot of friends involved, and there are people that are around us all the time. And not everybody appreciates your style of parenting. Not everybody, if you're going to say, if you're going to let the kids kind of, throw a tantrum and be like, I know you're frustrated, just stay there. And then, the grandmother will pop in and be like, oh, just give her a lollipop. And you're just like, oh,
Right. Yes.
And that's something very common here. To what degree, to what degree will the child stay listening to you? Or, the easier option would be that the child, he or she would be like, oh, but everybody else is doing it. You're the one that's, wrong. So why should I be listening to you? And how effective will that be? How much of an influence do you actually have on your child when he or she is around so many other people that are just as influential?
So one of the things that we didn't get to talk about on that Be a Role Model slide is that it's also really important to check in with other people. Because this is really hard. It's really hard work to model the behaviors that we hope to see for ourselves and for our children. And so having opportunities to talk with other people about, well, how do you handle it when your child is really pushing the limits? Do you give in? When do you give in? Why do you give in? Because we've all parents have been there, and we've all done things that we might not feel as good about. So it's really important to have opportunities to share that and to hear people reflect back to you, both what they've done, but also what they think you're doing. But to your point about kids being exposed to different kinds of role models, that is the reality. And as much as we might try to only expose our children to things that we think are in line with the way we want to do things, it wouldn't be possible. And children are very able to differentiate between how people respond to them and the rules that are set out. So even within a household, I know in my household, my husband and I do things very differently. And our children will definitely try to figure out where those lines are, and we're very clear with them that we may do things differently, but we're not going to cross the other one, which I think is important when children are navigating multiple relationships. But they will be able to understand, oh, when I'm with my grandparents, I get more things that I want, and then when I'm with my parents, I know what the rules are, and I can't always get it in the same kind of way. And they will push, because that's their job, is to push and to test the limit, but they are able to know in different settings that there are different expectations of them and that they have to behave accordingly.
I was going to ask, is there some part of the appreciating differences that perhaps connect, that people are different role models, they do things differently, and a part of developing that appreciation of these differences and understanding why perhaps people, your grandma gives you lots of M&Ms and sugar because she doesn't have to deal with the aftermath of you climbing the walls.
Right, absolutely. And also just, when children go to other friends' houses, and to be clear, like, in this household, they may allow you to watch TV while you're eating dinner. That doesn't mean that we do it in our house. It doesn't mean that one is necessarily better than the other, but there are different ways to move through the world, and different families have their own way of doing things.
I was just going to ask a brief question around, I work as a school counselor here in Abu Dhabi with kindergarten students and their families. And one of the struggles I find in the classroom and with parents is that we know a lot what we don't want kids to do, but people fall apart when it comes to what they can do. So we say it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to be mean. You know, there are tips you learn when you're working more closely with children about how to do it. So I was just curious about when you were talking out of the project, what kind of strategies and tips and things are coming out of the project that you would be sharing with people eventually. How do you foresee what kinds of products or what sort of things are you following up on in those tools that people can use so that it's parents, it's teachers, sort of how does that unfold? How one really adds.
I have a school counseling background as well, so glad to hear your question from that perspective. We are always at Making Caring Common trying to develop tools and resources that are not time intensive and do not require a lot of resources. There's been a proliferation lately of curriculum and products that you can purchase, and if you follow the script, it helps teach children skills, and that is true. But not everybody is going to do that. And so we are always looking for ways and practices that parents can integrate into their parenting, that teachers can integrate into the daily lives of their classroom, that are embedded within what they're already doing. So it doesn't have to be an add-on. It's not a new thing that you have to do. It's something that you can make part of your routine and find ways to expand and enhance what you're already doing.
Thank you very much. I'm fortunate enough that all the questions I had have already been asked. But I just wanted to make a comment on something that someone else had said about the child who may be not doing the bullying, but being the one to pick on. I think one of the things that I've learned with my 2 toddlers is to ask the question, why are they behaving this way? It could very well be that that child doesn't have a model, and therefore wouldn't understand that this is hurtful. And then the question becomes, well, whose job is it? It's, you know, the effect is being felt at school, but maybe the parent isn't also aware enough to be the one to educate. So that's something else I think that I'm trying to teach my kids, is that if somebody's behaving in a way that is not how you would like them to behave, and not how you're being, you know, you're teaching your child to behave, teach your child to ask the question, why is he behaving that way? And that could sometimes reduce the hurt that you feel when somebody's being mean to you. And it helps kind of the concept of being the bigger person. And then just, I'd like to share a concept that a friend taught me, which I thought was, it just floored me when she told me. She said, we focus a lot about, as adults, on New Year's resolutions. And she came up with a concept of basically dividing your resolutions into 3. A personal resolution, so we're all talking about getting fit, you know, losing weight, buying this, doing that. And then a professional one. And then the third one is a community resolution, which I think all of us tend to forget. And I hadn't thought of it either. And I've been teaching it to my 4-year-old. So now we talk about a personal one, so he wants to buy a dinosaur. A professional one, or in his case would be school-wise, what would he like to achieve? And then a community one, you know, what can we do in the community? And so we've learned to cull his toys, for example, and take them for donation. So that's something I think that you could do at any age, and it's something you could start with today, even in Abu Dhabi. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a lovely, lovely example. It also makes me think there's something else that we didn't get to in one of our tips, but that you can make that a daily practice of reflecting and being grateful. And you could do it in similar ways. You know, what are you grateful about what happened to you today? What are you grateful about in our family? What are you grateful about in our community? And really giving children the language and those opportunities to think about sort of those expanding circles of concern and obligation. So thank you for raising that.
Okay, we just have time for 2 more questions. I think, does somebody have the mic? You have the mic? Okay, 1 more after this.
Yeah, it's just a note more than a question, or something just to shed a light on. What is the chances to extend the notion of caring for the community to the built environment, part of the community? I've been researching the broken window syndrome communities where, you know, the the discaring or the not caring for the community have impact on abusing the assets, the public assets, or the public buildings and schools and etc. So I wish this study will be extended to conclude this kind of caring, into this. So caring is not always charity, is not always, feelings and stuff. It also has a physical manifestation on the community.
Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing that up. It also extends beyond physical buildings or assets, and we can think about it as the environmental concerns, and really being concerned about the world around us, other species that share this planet with us. And it's so important for our kids to be able to really think about the range and the impact that their individual actions have in all of the different ways.
Last question.
A very quick one. Is there an age at which children's personalities become set? So if your child isn't empathic by the time they're 10 years old, then they're sort of stuck in that way? Or, is it never too late to start?
It is never too late to start. But also important to think about empathy as being related to, but not determined by, children's personalities. And so some children might demonstrate that they seem to be more concerned about other people or more likely to help out, but that it's not set in stone, that they are less likely to be, and we can always give them examples and opportunities to practice being more caring towards others and to reinforce it when they are.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have left. I think myself and Dr. Luba will remain behind for half an hour or so to have private discussions, one-to-ones. But I'd just like to thank our guest one more time for making the journey. And also, I think for you guys to thank yourselves for making the effort to come out on this very important topic. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think there's some evaluation sheets that you can fill in. They're with them, so please, if you can, fill the evaluation sheets in. And we hope to see you on the 2nd of May when we have the second part of this particular session, which is prevention of bullying, starts in early childhood, begins in early childhood even. Okay, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.